outdated, broken, cheap looking, and just plain ugly. These adjectives describe most of the lamps that I see at the thrift store. However, they are also one of the best bargains on the shelves. So in today's video, I challenged myself to upcycle 10 different lamps that I thought most people would pass by. I transformed every single one into something stylish, unique, and completely unexpected. I can't wait for you to see the before and afters. So let's get started. I normally wouldn't buy a contemporary lamp like this one, but it was only $4, and I had an idea for transforming it into something cute and cottagey. To begin, I pulled away the felt bottom so that I could remove the two nuts that were holding the base to the rest of the lamp. This allowed better access to the body of the lamp so that I could more easily wrap it with strands of raffia. I just hot glued one end of raffia to the metal rectangle and began wrapping it around the metal, making sure each new loop slightly overlapped the previous one to completely conceal the metal. When I reached the end of a piece of raffia, I hot glued it to the metal and started with a new strand of raffia, wrapping over the previous piece. To make this easier, you might want to paint the lamp the color of your raffia before you begin. Once the metal was completely covered, I pushed the rectangle back into the base and reattached and tightened the nuts on the bottom. Then I used a little spray adhesive to reattach the felt bottom. I think the lamp already looks better, but I'm not done. I'm going to add 2 ceramic butterfly pot perchers that I bought on sale at Hobby Lobby. The orange paint on the butterflies was a little brighter than I prefer, so I brushed antiquing wax on them and lightly dabbed off the excess to give them a more subdued appearance. To attach them to the lamp, I used hot glue on the back of the butterflies' bodies and then used their wire arms to grip onto the raffia. The lampshade that came with this lamp was black and pretty scratched up, so I gave it a light, even coat of ultra matte black spray paint to freshen it up. I let the paint cure overnight, and the next day I cut out some botanical IOD rub-on transfers to adhere to the shade, selecting floral transfers with insects and butterflies. Luckily, they adhered easily and perfectly to the shade without damaging the paint at all. To finish off the lampshade and help it to better coordinate with the rustic raffia, I hot glued Dollar Tree burlap trim along the top and bottom edges of the shade. I think this turned out super cute, and even if this is not your style, I think you have to admit you are not going to find anything like it in a store. This lamp was large, heavy, and at $10, the most expensive of all the lamps I thrifted this week. To disassemble almost any lamp, follow these 4 steps. Step 1, loosen and remove the nuts on the underside of the lamp base. You may need to remove a piece of felt from the bottom to see the nut. Once the nut is removed, the lamp parts will separate. Step 2, pull or unscrew the top socket cover, which will be either metal or plastic. This will reveal 2 screws. Step 3, loosen the screws and remove the wire wrapped around them. Step 4, pull out the cord from the bottom and the lamp parts will separate. That's it. I wanted to turn these lamp parts into a decorative urn. So I first put the pieces back together just the way they had been, but ultimately
I decided to use the slotted piece as a lid on top rather than in the center. I attached the bowl-shaped piece to the base and the lamp finial to the center of the slotted piece using Gorilla Glue clear gel. I let the glue dry overnight. The next day, I took it outside and spray painted the entire piece with ultra matte black spray paint. I think one of the things that makes resin look cheap is that oftentimes color dyes are added to the resin mixture before it solidifies, unlike wood or metal that are painted on the outside. So just painting these pieces is a huge improvement. Once the spray paint was dry, I brushed on antiquing wax to give some additional depth to the black paint. I brushed it on thick and only slightly dabbed away the excess. I didn't need to glue the top slotted piece in place because it sits nicely in the rim of the bowl. So I can remove it to add plants, flowers, or small decor inside. Here's another lamp I wouldn't normally buy, and this one ended up being the most overpriced of all the tin lamps I thrifted, which I'll explain in a minute. For this upcycling project, I began by spraying the lamp with white Zinsser primer. When the primer was dry, I sprayed it again with a white satin spray paint. By now, you know the 4 steps for taking a lamp apart. Loosen and remove the nut on the bottom, then unscrew or pull off the top socket cover to reveal the screws. Unfortunately, some newer, cheaper lamps like this one have to be pried apart to get to the screws, and the plastic usually breaks in the process like it did here. I can still use the cord and other lamp parts, but I'll need to use a different socket. I'm going to use this thrift store enamel coffee pot to create a new lamp. There's already a hole in the lid, so I just need to drill a hole in the bottom. I ran the cord back through the lamp's base and metal tube and then situated the tube in the enamel pot, with one end sticking out through the hole in the lid and the threaded end sticking through the hole in the bottom so that I could screw it back into the lamp base. Some lamps like this have weights in the bottom to keep them from tipping over, so you'll want to replace it before reattaching the nut. To replace the broken socket, I took one from another thrift store lamp whose base was cracked. Most lamp parts are universal in size and interchangeable. So I just screwed on the bottom socket cover, attached the wires to the screws, situated the socket into the bottom cover, and screwed on the top socket cover. To dress up the plain coffee pot, I chose an IOD strawberry rub-on transfer to coordinate with the red trim on the pot. Transfers adhere easily to smooth surfaces like this. Because the pot is a little rusty and scratched up, I distressed the transfer with a sanding block so it would look original to the pot. Next, I wanted to make a coordinating lampshade from a plain thrift store shade by covering it with this fun strawberry fabric, originally from Walmart. It's fairly easy to cover a shade with fabric. Spray the shade with a good spray adhesive like Elmer's Craft Bond. Then place the shade in a corner of the fabric and roll it over the fabric, smoothing it out as you go. Cut off the excess fabric along the top and bottom edges and from where the fabric overlaps on the side of the shade. Once the bulk of the fabric is removed, you can more easily trim the fabric edges neatly. Create a straight edge where the fabric overlaps on the side. You can fold the top fabric under if you like. Leave just enough fabric along the top and bottom edges to fold over, and then use spray adhesive or hot glue to hold it in place. Depending on the diameter of your shade, you may need to cut small slits in the fabric so that it will lie flat, especially next to the wire fittings. For even more cottage cuteness, I hot glued red rickrack along the top and bottom edges of the shade. Since there was just a hole in the pot lid where a knob would have been, I decided to glue a ceramic strawberry next to the lamp pipe to partly conceal the hole. And I found the perfect strawberry on a jar lid in my stash. I thrifted this little resin lamp for its small size and cheap price. To take it apart, I once again followed those 4 steps that you must have memorized by now. Find the nut on the base and remove it. Remove the socket cap to reveal the screws. Loosen the screws and pull out the wires. Then pull out the cord through the lamp base. Look at this adorable resin duck that I picked up at Hobby Lobby for $9. To turn it into a lamp, I figured out where I wanted to place the lamp rod. You don't need a special drill bit to drill into resin. I used a large all-purpose bit for the lamp rod hole on the duck's back and a smaller bit for the cord hole in the bottom. Actually, the most challenging part was running the cord through the duck's body. I just kept pushing more of the cord into the duck until I could finally see some of the cord through the hole on top. Then I used a pair of pointed tweezers to grab hold of the cord and pull it through the hole. After running the cord through the lamp rod, I applied Gorilla Glue clear gel to the lamp rod and then inserted it into the top drilled hole. To get the lamp working, I reattached the wires to the screws, slid on the top socket cap, and pushed it back into the bottom cap. I tied some twine around the lamp rod and the duck's neck to hold the rod upright while the glue dried. And for good measure, I added some extra adhesive around the lamp rod. I wanted the lampshade to look like the duck was wearing a fancy hat, but the shade I had on hand was a little too big. So I used an X-Acto knife to cut about 3/4 of an inch off the bottom of the shade. Then I used scissors to even out the cut edge. I know I cut off the metal ring along the shade's bottom edge, but I'm going to cover it with fabric, which will add some extra support to help the shade maintain its shape. For the fabric, I chose a thrift store napkin. I cut off the hemmed edges and ironed the fabric. Then I adhered it to the shade in the same way as I did with the strawberry fabric in the previous project. I just covered the shade with spray adhesive, then rolled it over the fabric, cut off the excess fabric, trimmed up the fabric edges, used hot glue to create a clean seam down the side of the shade, and to fold over the top and bottom edges. For a whimsical look, I hot glued some tassel trim along the bottom edge of the shade. Then I hot glued 2 pieces of the napkin's hem to the inside of the shade on opposite sides, so that when I placed the shade on the lamp, I could tie them under the duck's head. I thrifted this smaller black lamp for its simple shape. I'm thinking that you know the disassembly drill by now. Remove the nut, remove the socket case, loosen the screws, pull out the cord. I want to slide something on the lamp pipe, so this time I also removed the socket. Then I reattached the bottom nut, securing the lamp pipe back in place. Next, I slid on a cone of yarn that I thrifted for just $4. I returned all the lamp parts and attached the wires to the screws and then screwed the socket cap back on. To dress up the lampshade, I chose another IOD rub-on transfer. This one's from the traditional pots package. And I had to add some trim around the bottom edge. I selected blue rickrack to complement the color of the yarn. This lampshade sits really low on the lamp, so I decided to cut a couple inches off of the top of the shade. I used a ruler to draw a line to make sure that I cut straight. Because this shade is larger than the one I used with the duck lamp, I decided to try reattaching the metal ring. I cut it from the shade and then I tried putting it back along the upper edge with hot glue. It actually worked pretty well, although it looked really messy. I hot glued some more rickrack along the top edge. So now you can't tell that the shade was cut, but you could still see that messy metal ring. So to clean up the inside, I hot glued some braided trim over the metal ring. One look at this lamp, and I bet you can guess where I'm going with this upcycling project. I didn't care for the hammered bronze finish, so I painted it with Rust-Oleum's gold metallic spray paint. I also painted a thrifted metal bird's nest votive candle holder, a metal bird that I cut off a bird cage in last week's video, and 2 ceramic birds. For a more durable finish, I first sprayed the ceramic birds with Zinsser primer. To add the nest and birds to the inside of the lamp, I removed the nut on the bottom and moved the cage off the lamp base. Then I loosely reattached the nut to hold the lamp pipe upright. To attach the nest, I rested it on one of the leaves and then took gold florist wire and ran it through the nest and around the lamp pipe a couple of times. If I could do this over again, I would have removed the candle cup from inside the bird's nest. Next, I used Gorilla Glue Clear Gel to attach the 2 ceramic birds, placing one on a leaf and one on the lamp base. I slid the cage back on the lamp base and reassembled the lamp, holding the socket in place while I tightened the nut on the bottom. Unfortunately, the glue wasn't dry and one of the birds came loose, but I was able to reach through the cage and glue it back in place, using E6000 this time. This lamp didn't come with a shade, so I'm using one that came with a different thrift store lamp. And for a finishing touch, I glued the small metal bird to the top of a plain finial. I thrifted this floor lamp mainly for the black shade that I used with the birdcage lamp. For this transformation, I purchased a piece of metal yard decor at Hobby Lobby. Although I like the paint colors, I think painting it gold will give it an upgraded look. To neutralize the bright colors, I first sprayed it with Zinsser primer. The decorative piece on the base of the floor lamp was resin, so I could easily drill into it. I first cut the yard art into 2 separate stems. Then I drilled 2 holes into the resin just slightly larger than the metal stems. I filled the holes with E6000 and inserted the stems. Then I tied some twine around the stems to hold them upright until the glue had dried. Then I sprayed the lamp and the yard art with the same gold metallic spray paint that I had used on the birdcage lamp. I was hoping to find some metal leaf wall decor like this to add more height to the decorative elements. But when you're looking for something in particular at the thrift store, you can never find it. So I added a couple of metal butterflies to the pole instead. I attached them with E6000 and a little gold florist wire wrapped around the pole and through the holes in the butterfly wings. I thought this lamp would be the perfect complement to the botanical fabric on these two chairs. I was attracted to the simple, classic shape of this lamp, which I thought would be the perfect backdrop for some air dry clay appliques. I had this IOD wild berries mold with strawberry and blackberry designs that I was eager to try. Be sure to dust your clay molds with cornstarch to keep the clay from sticking. I don't work with clay a lot, so I'm sure there are better techniques. I just press the clay into the mold using my fingers. Since the lamp is not a flat surface, I immediately began applying the appliques while the clay was still soft. They easily popped out of the mold, but some of the larger ones did break, but I was able to put them back together on the lamp. I used wood glue to adhere them, but I think E6000 or Gorilla Glue also works well with clay. I just arranged the pieces in a random pattern on the front of the lamp. Then I let the clay dry for 3 days. If you paint air dry clay too soon, the paint can trap moisture, causing the clay to crack. I removed the nut on the bottom just so I didn't have to tape off the metal areas I wasn't planning on painting. I gave the clay applique and the body of the lamp 3 coats of an off-white chalk paint. When the paint was dry, I reassembled the lamp, tightening the nut on the bottom. Then I began applying black wax over the chalk painted areas. I often use Waverly antiquing wax. However, it is a water-based wax. So this time I used an oil-based wax that I felt would be safer on air-dry clay. I brushed it on, making sure to get into all the cracks and crevices of the applique, and then I immediately wiped off the excess with a rag. I thought the gray color looked nice with the lamp's black metal base. I just topped the lamp with a traditional drum shade that came with a different thrift store lamp. I'm not sure if this little lamp is brass, but it looks like it could be. The tag was hiding a hole in the base, so I think something was once attached to it that is now missing. But I love its simple shape, and I want to highlight that by using a large, clear light bulb with no lampshade. I bought a package of neutral colored butterflies or moths at Hobby Lobby. They look like paper, but they feel more like acetate or vinyl. Each butterfly has a long piece of wire attached to its body, so it was very easy to arrange the butterflies on the lamp. This is an LED bulb, so I did think about gluing one of the butterflies directly to the light bulb, but just to be extra safe, I didn't. I think this lamp ended up with a dark academia vibe that I love. I hope you found lots of inspiration in today's video. It sure was a fun one to make. And I would truly love to know which lamp was your favorite. And if you're curious, check the pinned comment to find out which lamp was my favorite. Thank you so much for watching today. Hope to see you next week.